Hi, I'm Gregg Wallis, Senior Editor of Hotel Business, and we're joined by Daniel H. Lesser, who is the co-founder, president, and CEO of LW Hospitality Advisors. Thanks so much for joining us, Daniel.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So there are a lot of question marks about the state of the industry, and though it's perhaps a long answer, where do you think we are?
That's a great question. Listen, like everything else in life, there are strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There are a lot of strengths currently in terms of hotel fundamentals, in spite of all the noise that we hear in terms of what's going on with inflation and other economic challenges in the world. The hotel business has never enjoyed a more robust rebound than this current rebound post-COVID. Supply is fairly muted in terms of new supply. We've had a number of hotels close permanently or be converted to some sort of alternative use. Demand is strong, both domestic and international inbound. International inbound still has a ways to go. Domestic has been strong post-COVID. It's trailed off a little bit because people are now going overseas. You know, the economy, this is the longest predicted recession I can ever recall, and yet we are still not in a recession, and the prognosticators are now saying we probably won't go into a recession.
Sure.
I'm not an economist, so I don't have an opinion one way or the other in terms of where the economy is going. But the fact is that people love to travel, and Americans don't have a problem spending money, even if they don't have the money. They seem to have it now. Consumer confidence is actually fairly robust. The stock market is at all-time highs. So there are a lot of positives. There clearly are some challenges in the space as well. I mean, you know, labor is clearly a challenge. The cost of it, the amount of available labor, property taxes, insurance, energy costs. There's a lot of pressure on the expense side of the equation. Inflation is a challenge for expenses as well, on the one hand. On the other hand, one of the beauties about hotel investment is that you get to reprice rooms by the nanosecond, with technology being what it is. So in a rising market, that's a beautiful thing. In a declining market, it can kill you, as we saw during COVID.
Yes, definitely.
So it's a mixed bag in terms of where we are today. But generally, I think that we're in a great spot. I've been doing what I do for quite some time, and I don't recall ever there being a period of time where hotels were perceived as a darling investment class, particularly compared to office buildings. You know, historically, office buildings were a steady Eddie, and today office buildings are a dirty word. And so it's quite remarkable that, you know, hotels again are just perceived as a darling asset class. There's an incredible amount of money that's been raised, that was raised during COVID, that never got deployed. There's more money that's been raised during just the recent past, targeted towards U.S. commercial real estate, and then specifically to hospitality. Hospitality is a great hedge against inflation.
Sure.
And the transaction market has been somewhat slow because there's a delta between bid and ask, and that spread seems like it will narrow during the coming year. There's a tremendous amount of debt that's coming due that's going to have to be dealt with. So it's going to catalyze transaction activity.
Sure.
With all the money that's out there, the opportunities that have compelling stories behind them will ultimately get bid up. So what I believe we're going to see is some distress-induced transaction activity that will not necessarily reflect distressed pricing.
Sure. And what advice do you have for someone who is interested in investing in hotels?
Well, first of all, recognize that hotels are a unique asset class. They're very different than office buildings, shopping centers, apartment buildings, right? If you think about a full-service hotel, in addition to putting heads in beds, you're selling food, you're selling beverage, you probably have some retail outlets, you may have some recreational facilities. From a revenue perspective, those are all different, very different income streams. Then think about the expense side of the equation, right? Putting heads in beds is very different than controlling the cost of food and beverage. So it's a complicated, hotels are a complicated real estate asset class. And candidly, what they are, hotels, are real estate, bricks and mortar real estate that are intertwined with a going business concern. So it's a very specialized product. And my advice is, if you are new to the space or part-time to the space, hire some good advisors. There are a lot of investors out there that are hotel-centric, and that's all they do, right? But there are also a lot of folks who are coming into the space for the first time, and I would advise proceed with caution.
Sure. And what happens for someone who has a property and they're thinking about selling? What advice do you have for them?
Well, first of all, figure out what your objective is. Are you looking to exit because you have to exit sooner rather than later? Are you looking to exit because you're looking to maximize value? Prepare your property for sale. Don't just put it on the market. I recommend engaging an intermediary as opposed to going it alone and just trying to sell an asset without a broker. I don't think that's a smart thing to do. And think very strategically about it and methodically. And don't rush to market. Take your time and position an asset for sale. No different than selling a house, right? Make it look good from a physical perspective. Low-hanging fruit in terms of repairs and maintenance should be dealt with before you go to market. So there's a lot that can be done to position an asset for sale, and that should be done.
Fantastic. And how did you get involved in the hospitality industry? How did you get to where you are now?
Well, that's a great question. So I'm a street kid from Queens, New York, who was not very academically oriented, and I was fortunate to come across a book while I was in high school called Your Career in Hotels and Motels, because back then we had a lot of motels.
Right.
And it was a fascinating book. The middle of the book had about 10 pages, double-sided, black and white pages of hotels all around the world. You have to realize this was back in the 1970s. The world was much bigger then. And I was just fascinated by what I read in this book in the lodging industry. And so I applied to hotel school. I ended up going to the École Italienne Lausanne for a couple of years.
Very nice.
Then I ultimately graduated from Cornell University's hotel school. I worked for Hilton for a number of years in operations at the New York Hilton Hotel. It was an amazing learning laboratory, 2,000-room property. I went through every sub-department within the front office, every sub-department within food and beverage, finished my operational career as a catering salesperson. And then I was Steve Rushmore's first hire when he founded HVS, which was back then Hospitality Valuation Services. That was in 1980. Spent 13 years with him. I joined Cushman & Wakefield, started up a hotel consulting advisory practice with them for 11 years. Then did it a third time in my career with CB Richard Ellis for 5 years, and launched with my partner Evan Weiss, LW Hospitality Advisors, exactly 13 years ago. It was January 5th. We just had our 13th anniversary.
Excellent. Well, great. Thank you, Daniel, so much for joining us today. And I appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me.
Sure.